Humanity had returned from extinction, and it had not come back to Nagat, the War of Extinction. The Grand Alliance formed 3 weeks after the Council meeting. 47 species pledged their fleets to stop humanity's rampage. The Vralith Dominion, the Corvaxian Empire, the Pelian Trade Consortium, and dozens of smaller powers united under one goal: exterminate the humans before they could threaten civilized space any further. Their combined armada numbered 15,000 warships. Fleet Admiral Kravik of the Corvaxian Empire stood on his command carrier's bridge and felt confident. They had scouts tracking human movements. They had prepared ambush points. They had numbers that would overwhelm any defense. The humans had at most 3,000 ships. The mathematics were simple. Kravik was about to learn that mathematics meant nothing when fighting an enemy with nothing left to lose. The first major engagement happened near the Meridian Cluster, a strategic system that controlled access to 3 major trade routes. The Alliance fleet moved into position, confident they could force the humans into a decisive battle. They were right about one thing: the humans came to fight. Commander Seogen led the Second Fleet into the Meridian system with only 800 ships. The Alliance fleet was waiting, outnumbering them 20-1. Kravik smiled as his sensors detected the human vessels dropping out of quantum space. Finally a proper battle. Finally a chance to crush these upstart primitives. All ships battle formation, Kravik ordered. Prepare to demonstrate the price of defying civilized space. The human ships didn't form defensive lines. They didn't try to maneuver for advantage. They simply accelerated directly toward the Alliance fleet at maximum speed, their quantum drives pushing them to velocities that should have been impossible. They're committing suicide, Kravik's tactical officer said, confused. They're going to ram us? Let them, Kravik replied. Our shields will hold against impacts. Fire all weapons as they approach. The Alliance fleet opened fire. Energy beams and kinetic rounds filled space, striking the human vessels. Some exploded. Others had their hulls shredded. But the rest kept coming. And as they closed the distance, Kravik began to understand his mistake. The human ships weren't just ramming. They were positioning themselves throughout the Alliance formation, weaving between capital ships and carriers. Then they detonated, not their reactors. Something far worse. Each human ship that died triggered a quantum destabilization wave, tearing holes in space-time that consumed everything within a kilometer radius. Alliance ships found themselves suddenly missing sections of their hulls, their reactors, their crew quarters. Reality itself warped and twisted as the humans weaponized their own deaths. Defensive Pattern 6, Kravik screamed. Get them away from our carriers. But it was too late. Half the human fleet had already died, taking 100 Alliance ships with them. The surviving human vessels swept through the chaos, their quantum torpedoes finding targets that were already wounded and disorganized. They didn't fight like a conventional fleet. They fought like antibodies destroying an infection. Individual ships making independent decisions with perfect coordination. When the battle ended 3 hours later, the Alliance had lost nearly 4,000 ships. The human Second Fleet was completely destroyed, but they had accomplished their objective. The Meridian Cluster was now a debris field, the trade routes blocked for months. How? Kravik stood among the wreckage of his fleet, staring at the casualty reports. They were outnumbered. They should have been destroyed. How did we lose? His second officer, a veteran of a dozen campaigns, spoke quietly. Because they weren't trying to win, sir. They were trying to hurt us, and when an enemy doesn't care about surviving, conventional tactics become meaningless. The Battle of Meridian was just the beginning. Across the galaxy, human fleets engaged Alliance forces in actions that defied every principle of military strategy. They attacked supply convoys with overwhelming force, destroying ships carrying food and medicine to conquered worlds. They boarded capital ships through breached hulls, fighting hand-to-hand in damaged sections where the Alliance's superior numbers meant nothing. Engineer Nari unveiled humanity's most terrifying weapon 3 months into the war. The Genesis protocol was simple in concept, horrifying in execution. Nanite swarms that didn't just destroy enemy ships but consumed them, breaking down metal and organic matter into raw materials that could be used to build new human vessels. The first Alliance fleet to encounter Genesis was patrolling near the Thera system when their sensors detected a cloud moving through space. Not a nebula or asteroid field, but something that glittered with unnatural light. The fleet's commander ordered evasive maneuvers, but the cloud was faster than any ship. It fell upon the fleet like a plague. The nanites consumed hull plating, then internal systems, then crew members, breaking everything down to molecular components. Within 6 hours, a fleet of 300 ships had been reduced to nothing. Within 12 hours, 300 new human vessels emerged from the cloud, built from the recycled materials of their enemies. "They're turning our own ships against us," Fleet Admiral Kravik reported to the Alliance Council. His voice shook. "Every fleet we lose makes them stronger. This isn't a war. It's a virus, and we're feeding it." But the Alliance had committed too deeply to back down now. To retreat would be to show weakness, and in galactic politics, weakness meant death. They threw more ships into the conflict, more soldiers, more resources. They had to win. The alternative was unthinkable. Species began to fracture under the pressure. The Theron Collective announced their withdrawal from the Alliance after a human assassination team killed their prime minister in his own palace. The Krellix network sued for peace after human operatives destroyed their capital city's main reactor, killing 17 million civilians in the resulting meltdown. "We didn't participate in Earth's destruction," the Krellix ambassador pleaded in his surrender broadcast. "We only aired entertainment about it." How does that justify genocide? Admiral Jiho's response was broadcast across every channel in the galaxy. "You profited from our deaths. You made jokes while our children burned. You are complicit. There is no distinction between those who pulled the trigger and those who cheered them on." The assassinations continued. Corporate executives found dead in their offices. Military commanders killed by bombs that appeared from nowhere. Politicians who had celebrated Earth's fall discovered that nowhere in the galaxy was safe. Humanity's message was clear. There would be no forgetting. There would be no moving on. Every single person who had benefited from Earth's destruction would pay the price. The Vraleth Dominion, facing attacks on multiple fronts, began to collapse. Member species seceded rather than face human vengeance. Supply lines crumbled. The military academies emptied as officers resigned rather than fight an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with or defeated. Supreme Commander Thaxil, the architect of Earth's destruction, tried to flee to the galactic rim where he hoped human ships couldn't reach. He made it 300 light-years before Captain Doyen found him. The old engineer, now commanding humanity's fastest pursuit vessels, had spent months tracking Thaxil across the galaxy. The capture was broadcast live. Thaxil, stripped of his medals and rank, stood in a bare metal chamber facing the man whose world he had destroyed. There was no jury, no appeals process, no lengthy trial. Just one question. "Did you give the order to burn Earth?" Do-hyun asked, his voice tired. He looked ancient now, decades older than his actual age, worn down by years of war and grief. "I did," Thaxil replied. He tried to stand with dignity, but his voice cracked. It was a military decision. "Your world was in Dominion space. Resources needed to be claimed. I was following protocol." "Protocol," Do-hyun repeated softly. "You exterminated 10 billion people because of protocol." "I was doing my duty," Thaxil shouted. "You're primitives. You don't understand how the galaxy works. The strong take what they want from the weak. It's always been this way." Do-hyun stared at him for a long moment. Then he nodded to the guards. "Execute him. Broadcast it on every channel. I want the galaxy to see what happens to those who think genocide is just business." Thaxil's execution lasted exactly 6 hours, the same length of time it had taken his fleet to destroy Earth. The broadcast was watched by trillions across the galaxy. Some cheered. Others protested the barbarism. Most simply watched in silence, understanding that they were witnessing the end of an era. The galaxy had always operated on the principle that might made right. The strong conquered the weak, and that was simply how things were. But humanity had introduced a new principle: consequences. The strong could still conquer the weak, but now they had to ask themselves if the prize was worth becoming humanity's next target. The war ground on for 5 more years. The Alliance slowly disintegrated as species withdrew or were destroyed. The Vraleth Dominion shattered completely, its member worlds declaring independence and frantically distancing themselves from the regime that had brought human wrath upon them. Commander Seojin died in the Battle of the Korvaxian home system, taking his entire fleet and 3 Alliance fleets with him in a final quantum detonation that left the planet's orbit filled with debris. Dr. Sora died developing the next generation of weapons, killed in an X. The message the Galactic Council had not met in full assembly for over a century. It took something truly catastrophic to bring together representatives from 400 species, to make them leave their homeworlds and gather on the neutral station of Terminus Prime. The last time had been to discuss the formation of the Vralith Dominion itself. This time they gathered to discuss how to stop humanity. The council chamber was enormous, a sphere 300 meters across with seats arranged in concentric rings. Each species had its place, from the powerful Corvaxian Empire in the inner ring to the minor trading guilds in the outer sections. Translator devices hummed as hundreds of languages were rendered into understandable speech. The air carried the scent of 1,000 different atmospheres, carefully balanced to offend no one. Ambassador Hyunwoo walked through the entrance corridor and the chamber fell silent. 400 pairs of eyes in every color and configuration imaginable turned to watch him. He was the first human most of these species had ever seen, and he could feel their fear, their curiosity, their hatred radiating like heat. He wore a simple black uniform with one insignia, a blue and green planet burning. Earth, the wound that would never heal. Admiral Jiho walked beside him, older now, his hair gray, his face carved with lines of grief and rage. He was humanity's military commander, the architect of the campaign that had terrorized the galaxy for the past 3 months. Together, they made their way to the center of the chamber, to the speaking platform that floated in empty space. The Corvaxian Emperor spoke first, his voice translated into a deep rumble that filled the chamber. Humans, you stand accused of crimes against civilized space. 23 worlds have fallen silent under your assault. Hundreds of thousands have died. You wage war without declaration, without mercy, without honor. The Council demands an explanation and an immediate cessation of hostilities. Hyunwoo said nothing. He simply activated the holographic display, and the chamber filled with images. Earth as it had been, beautiful and alive. Then Earth as it became, burning under Vralith weapons. The footage was raw, unedited, taken from the sensors of the Teguk as it watched humanity's homeworld die. Some of the delegates looked away. Others watched in silence. The images continued. Cities erasing in purple light, oceans boiling, the atmosphere turning black with ash and smoke. 3 billion dead in 6 hours. 7 billion more dying slowly in the nuclear winter that followed. We are aware of the tragedy that befell your homeworld, the Corvaxian Emperor said, though his voice had lost some of its certainty. The Vralith acted alone in that attack. The rest of the galaxy bears no responsibility for their crime. Doesn't it, Doctor? Hana stepped forward. She was humanity's diplomatic envoy, chosen because she could speak to power without flinching. Let me show the Council something interesting. She activated a new set of displays. Trade records, entertainment broadcasts, corporate documents. Each one telling the same story. The galaxy had profited from Earth's destruction. These are records from the Palian merchant guilds, Hana said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. They show the purchase and sale of human biological samples acquired from Vralith sources 3 days after Earth fell. Apparently, human DNA was quite valuable for genetic research. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Palian representative shifted uncomfortably in his seat. These are entertainment broadcasts from the Krelix networks, Hana continued. They show celebrations of Earth's destruction, commentary praising the Vralith for cleansing the galaxy of a primitive species. This particular show had 3 billion viewers. The Krelix delegates' tentacles curled in shame. And these, Hana said, her voice hardening, are corporate prospectuses from 47 different species, all discussing the exploitation of Sol system resources, the asteroids, the gas giants, the burned corpse of Earth itself, minerals to be mined from our dead homeworld. The chamber erupted in chaos, delegates shouting denials, accusations, justifications. Some claimed ignorance. Others insisted they were just following market forces. The Pelian ambassador stood and pointed at Admiral Jiho. Even if all of this is true, it doesn't justify your actions, he shouted. You've killed hundreds of thousands. You've destroyed military and civilian targets without distinction. You are no better than the Vraleth." The chamber fell silent. Everyone turned to Admiral Jiho, waiting for his response. He had said nothing since entering the chamber, just stood there with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the council argue over humanity's right to exist, to fight back, to seek justice for genocide. Finally, he spoke. Just one sentence, delivered in a quiet voice that somehow carried to every corner of the vast chamber. "You attacked our home." 5 words. Simple, undeniable. They hung in the air like a judgment. "The Vraleth attacked your home," the Korvaxian Emperor corrected. "Not us. Not the hundreds of innocent species you threaten with your rampage." "You watched," Jiho said, his voice still quiet but carrying an edge now, sharp as broken glass. "You watched our world burn. You watched 3 billion people die. Some of you cheered, some of you profited. All of you did nothing." "What could we have done?" a delegate from the Theron Collective shouted. "The Vraleth are powerful. We couldn't have stopped them." "You could have tried," Hana said softly. "You could have sent a warning. You could have offered sanctuary to survivors. You could have condemned the attack. You could have done 100 things that would have shown us that the galaxy had a conscience. Instead, you did nothing. You are complicit through your silence." "This is madness," the Vraleth representative finally spoke, standing from his seat. "We acted within our rights as a sovereign power. Sol 3 was unclaimed territory. We had every legal right to exploit it for resources. That the local species proved troublesome was unfortunate but irrelevant." Jiho turned to look at the Vraleth delegate. The air in the chamber seemed to freeze. Everyone could feel the weight of his gaze, the terrible promise contained in his eyes. "Legal right," Jiho repeated slowly. "You believe you had a legal right to exterminate my species?" "By galactic law, yes," the Vraleth delegate said, though he took a step back despite himself. "Your species had not achieved faster-than-light travel. You had not petitioned for council recognition. You were, legally speaking, fauna. Resources to be exploited or eliminated as necessary." "I see," Jiho said. He turned back to address the full council. "Then let me explain humanity's position with perfect clarity. We don't care about your laws. We don't care about your treaties or your trade agreements or your political alliances. You attacked our home. You killed our families. You erased our civilization from existence. And now we're going to make you pay for it. This is a declaration of war against the entire galaxy," the Korvaxian Emperor roared. "You are 200,000 survivors hiding in the darkness. We are billions upon billions with fleets that could blot out your sun. You cannot win." "We don't need to win," Jiho said calmly. "We just need to make you regret what you did. We need to hurt you enough that the next time some species considers genocide, they remember what happened to the Vraleth. What happened to everyone who stood by and watched." Hana activated one final display. A list of names, thousands of them, scrolling endlessly. "These are the individuals we hold responsible for Earth's destruction," she explained. "Vraleth officers who gave orders, corporate executives who profited, politicians who celebrated, entertainment producers who mocked our deaths. We have identified them all. We know where they live, where they work, where their families gather, and we are coming for every single one of them." "You're talking about assassination," the Pelian ambassador said, his voice hollow. "About hunting down individuals across hundreds of worlds. About terrorism." "We're talking about justice," Hana corrected. "But if you want to call it terrorism, that's fine. We've been called worse." "The Council will not stand for this," the Korvaxian Emperor declared. "We will form a defensive pact. Every species in this chamber will contribute ships. We will hunt you down and end your crusade." "You're welcome to try," Jiho said. He began walking toward the exit, Hyunwoo and Hana following. "We'll be waiting." "This is insanity," someone shouted from the crowd of delegates. "You're condemning yourselves to extinction. Again, is revenge really worth dying for?" Jiho stopped at the threshold and turned back one final time. "You seem to be under a misunderstanding," he said. "We're already dead. Everyone who knew Earth, who had families there, who remembered what it felt like to live under a real sun. We died 10 years ago. What you're fighting isn't humanity anymore. It's a ghost. And ghosts don't fear death." He left, and the council erupted into chaos behind him. Some species immediately began forming defensive alliances. Others started quietly withdrawing from galactic politics, hoping that isolation might protect them from human vengeance. 3. Minor species announced they would join humanity's cause, offering ships and soldiers to fight the Vreleth. But in the center of the chamber, displayed on the holographic screens for all to see, the list of names continued scrolling. Thousands of individuals marked for death. The galaxy's leaders, corporate chiefs, military commanders, all waiting to discover if their name appeared on humanity's list. The message was clear. The first strike Korath Prime was considered the most secure military installation in the Vreleth Dominion. Its planetary shields had never failed in 300 years. Its defense fleet of 200 warships rotated in perfect formations, scanning every approach vector. The base commanders were so confident in their defenses that they held regular tours for visiting dignitaries, showing off the impregnable fortress that guarded the Dominion's frontier. On the morning the humans came, the base was hosting just such a tour. Admiral Krethvan was explaining to a group of newly promoted officers how the layered shield system worked, how the sensor network could detect anything larger than a shuttle from 10 light minutes away, how no enemy could possibly penetrate their defenses. He was in the middle of this lecture when every alarm in the command center began screaming at once. "Contacts," the sensor operator shouted. "Multiple contacts bearing—" "Wait, that's impossible. They're inside the shield perimeter." Krethvan spun toward the displays, his confidence evaporating. The sensors showed ships appearing directly in orbit around Korath Prime, materializing out of nothing as if they had simply wished themselves into existence. Dozens of them, sleek black vessels, smaller than Vreleth warships but radiating power signatures that made the sensors scream warnings. "Raise inner shields. Launch all fighters! Someone tell me who they are!" Krethvan barked orders, but his voice carried an edge of panic he had never felt before. The black ships didn't respond to hails. They didn't issue demands or warnings. They simply opened fire. Captain Yunji sat in the command chair of the Soul's Memory, the flagship of humanity's attack fleet. Around her, 30 other captains commanded their vessels through the neural link, their minds connected to the ship AI in a way that let them react faster than any traditional crew. They had practiced this assault 1,000 times in simulation. Now it was real. "All ships execute Phase 1, she ordered calmly. "Quantum torpedoes, full spread. Target their orbital defense platforms first." The human fleet fired as one. The torpedoes were beautiful in a terrible way. Purple streaks of light that phased in and out of normal space, impossible to track or intercept. They struck the Vreleth defense platforms and simply erased them, the exotic matter warheads tearing holes in reality itself. The Vreleth fleet scrambled to respond, but they were too slow. Their shields, designed to stop kinetic rounds and conventional energy weapons, offered no protection against weapons that didn't exist in normal space-time until the moment of impact. Ship after ship detonated, their reactors overloading as quantum torpedoes punched through hulls and destroyed critical systems. "They're trying to close formation," reported the tactical AI directly into Yunji's mind. "Defensive pattern 7. Counter with pattern 3, Yunji responded without hesitation. "Focus fire on their command carrier." The human ships moved with inhuman precision, dancing through the Vreleth formations like schools of fish, their AI coordination, allowing them to execute maneuvers that would be impossible for organic crews. They focused their fire, overwhelming individual targets before moving to the next, picking apart the Vreleth fleet with surgical efficiency. On Korath Prime's surface, Admiral Krethvan watched in horror as his fleet died. In 15 minutes, 100 ships were gone. In 30 minutes, the orbital space was filled with debris and corpses. His officers were shouting, panicking, some already fleeing their posts. "Who are they?" One of the junior officers screamed. "What species commands technology like this?" Krethvan didn't answer. He was staring at one of the black ships as it passed close to a dying Vreleth cruiser. The sensors finally got a clean scan of its hull markings. There, painted in white against the black metal, was a symbol. A circle, blue and green, wounded and burning. A planet. And beneath it words in an alien script that the translator slowly rendered. Remember Earth. Kraithvan's blood ran cold. No, he whispered. That's impossible. We destroyed them. Sol 3 was sterilized. They're extinct. But the evidence was right in front of him. The extinct species had returned, and they had returned with a vengeance. Send a distress signal to High Command, Kraithvan ordered, his voice shaking. Tell them the humans survived. Tell them... The communication console exploded as a quantum torpedo struck the command center. Kraithvan's last thought was that he had underestimated them. They all had. 47 minutes after the attack began, Korath Prime fell silent. Every ship in orbit was destroyed. Every military installation on the surface was reduced to molten slag. The human fleet had executed every Vreleth soldier, officer, and technician with methodical efficiency. They didn't take prisoners. They didn't accept surrenders. They simply killed everyone and everything that wore the Vreleth uniform. All targets eliminated, the tactical AI reported. 0 human casualties. Ammunition reserves at 73%. Yunji felt nothing as she surveyed the carnage. No satisfaction, no guilt, just a cold acknowledgement that this was one base out of thousands. One small payment against an impossible debt. Move to Phase 2 coordinates, she ordered. We have 14 more targets this month. The human fleet vanished back into quantum space, leaving behind only wreckage and silence. The news of Korath Prime's destruction spread through the Vralith Dominion like wildfire. At first, High Command assumed it was a lie or a mistake. Then the other reports started coming in. The military station at Velktor destroyed. The supply depot at Theris 9 obliterated. The training academy on Praxis erased. 14 Vreleth installations fell in the first month. The attacks followed the same pattern. Ships appearing from nowhere, overwhelming firepower, total annihilation, then vanishing without a trace. No survivors were left to describe the attackers. Only sensor logs and the haunting message painted on black hulls. Remember Earth. Supreme Commander Thaxil was called before the Dominion Council to explain how an extinct species was tearing apart his defenses. He stood in the Grand Chamber, facing the assembled leaders of 12 star systems, and had no answers. We destroyed Sol 3 completely, he insisted. I personally verified the bombardment. Their planet was rendered lifeless. How could they possibly have survived? Yet they did survive, Counselor Vrak said coldly. And now they're destroying our fleets. Our member species are panicking. Some are already talking about secession. They fear the humans more than they fear us. Give me more ships, Thaxil demanded. I'll hunt them down. I'll finish what we started 10 years ago. You had better, Vrax replied. Because if the humans continue their rampage, it won't be them who face extinction. It will be us. But hunting the humans proved impossible. They struck from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. They never stayed to fight a prolonged battle. They never defended territory. They simply killed and moved on, ghosts that haunted the Dominion's nightmares. The human fleet, meanwhile, gathered in a hidden staging area, deep in the Oort cloud of an uninhabited system. The captains assembled virtually, their avatars meeting in a simulated conference room, while their ships floated in the darkness. Vralith casualties. Approximately 47,000 military personnel, Sora reported. Our casualties 0. The quantum phase weapons are performing beyond expectations. They have no counter to them. The psychological effect is spreading, Hyunwoo added. 3 species have petitioned to leave the Dominion. 4 others are demanding protection from human attacks. The Vreleth are discovering that fear is a more powerful weapon than any torpedo. Admiral Do Hyun listened to the reports with satisfaction. This was only the beginning. They had struck at the Vraleth military infrastructure, proven that humanity could not be ignored. But the real message hadn't been delivered yet. The galaxy still didn't understand what they were dealing with. It's time for Phase 3, Do Hyun said. We stop hiding. We announce ourselves. We make them understand exactly what they created when they burned our world. The captains nodded in agreement. They had lived in the shadows for 10 years, building their strength in secret. Now it was time to step into the light and show the galaxy what humanity had become. The war was just beginning, and the Vreleth were about to learn a terrible truth, that destroying a civilization doesn't always end a threat. Sometimes it creates something far worse. The silence 10 years had passed since Earth burned, and the galaxy had forgotten about humanity. In the grand halls of the Vralith Dominion, Supreme Commander Thaxel received another medal for his conquest of the Pelian Trade Consortium. 300 worlds had fallen before his fleets in the past decade. He was celebrated across 12 star systems as the greatest military mind of the age. Sometimes, in quiet moments, he remembered that primitive planet he had ordered destroyed at the edge of Vralith space. Sol 3, they had called it. The memory was faint, unimportant, like recalling which shoe he had put on first that morning. The Vralith had moved on. The galaxy had moved on. No one gave the extinct humans a second thought. But in the darkness between stars, in places where sensors could not reach and light did not shine, humanity was very much alive. Commander Minho floated through the corridors of Forge Station, one of 47 hidden bases scattered throughout the asteroid belt. Before Earth died, he had been a mining engineer, someone who dug useful metals from rocks. Now he was the architect of something far more ambitious. "Show me the production numbers," he said to the holographic display floating beside him. The numbers appeared, and even after seeing them every day for 5 years, they still made him smile. The first year after Earth's fall, the survivors had managed to build 2 ships. Small things, barely functional, held together with desperation and grief. The second year, they had built 5. The third year, 15 now, in year 10, the hidden forges were producing 3 new warships every single day. "The Vralith think they destroyed us," Dr. Sora said, drifting up beside him. She looked older than her 40 years, her hair gone prematurely gray, her eyes carrying shadows that would never fade. She had been visiting family in Busan when the attack came. She had watched the orbital feeds as purple light erased everyone she loved. They have no idea what they created. Sora had been a theoretical physicist before, someone who studied quantum mechanics for the pure joy of understanding. Now she weaponized physics itself. The equations she had developed in the past decade would have won her a dozen awards in the old world. In this new reality, they simply made better tools for killing. "The quantum phase torpedoes are ready," she continued, pulling up schematics. They bypassed conventional shielding entirely. The Vralith shields that protected them during Earth's attack? Useless. Our weapons will punch through them like they're not even there. Minho nodded slowly. Every advancement, every new technology, every ship they built was another step toward the future they all dreamed about. The future where the screaming stopped, where the nightmares ended, where the Vralith paid for what they had done. In another part of the station, Engineer Tail was solving a different problem. They didn't have the population to crew massive fleets. They didn't have the manufacturing base to compete with empires that controlled hundreds of worlds. They had to be smarter. "The AI coordination is working beyond expectations," Teal reported during the daily briefing. "A single human captain can control an entire squadron through the neural link. The ships respond faster than any organic crew could manage. We're not matching Vralith numbers. We're making numbers irrelevant. But technology alone wouldn't win the war. They needed intelligence. They needed to know where the Vralith were, how they moved, what they feared. That's where Ambassador Hyunwoo came in. While the others built weapons in the darkness, he ventured out into the light, making contact with other species across the galaxy. He didn't announce himself as human. The galaxy thought humanity was extinct, and he kept it that way, using false identities and carefully constructed lies. The Krell had been conquered by the Vralith 30 years ago. They remembered how it felt to watch their homeworld burn. Hyunwoo listened to their stories and said nothing about Earth. He just asked questions. Where did the Vralith fleets patrol? What were their supply routes? How often did they change their security protocols? The Palian merchant guilds had grown rich selling salvage from conquered worlds. They had no love for the Vralith, only for profit. Hyunwoo bought information from them with gold mined from human asteroids, fleet compositions, defensive layouts, the location of the Vralith military academies where their officers trained. Piece by piece, encounter by encounter, Hyunwoo built a map of the enemy. Not just their military strength, but their culture, their psychology, their fears. He learned that the Vralith despised weakness above all things, that they had built their empire on the principle that might made right, that they genuinely believed inferior species had no right to exist. This information flowed back to the human survivors, analyzed and cataloged. Every scrap of intelligence was tested, verified, cross-referenced. They could not afford mistakes. They would only get one chance at this. In the hidden colonies, human children grew up in darkness. They were born on cold stations carved into asteroids, raised in artificial gravity, taught from birth that Earth was a memory and vengeance was a destiny. They learned mathematics by calculating weapons trajectories. They learned history by studying every battle the Vraleth had ever fought. They learned to hate before they learned to love. Some of the older survivors worried about this. Captain Do-hyun, now promoted to admiral and commander of the entire human remnant fleet, sometimes wondered what they were becoming. They had been explorers once, dreamers who built ships to touch the stars because they were curious and hopeful. Now they built ships for only one purpose. "We're raising warriors, not children," Ji-woo said to him one night as they floated in his quarters on the command station. She was head of the education division now, responsible for teaching the next generation everything they needed to survive. They don't play games. They don't dream about the future. They just prepare for the war. "Do we have a choice?" Do-hyun asked quietly. "No," Ji-woo admitted, "but I wonder sometimes what happens after. If we win, if we somehow destroy the Vraleth, will our children know how to be anything except soldiers?" Do-hyun had no answer for that. The question assumed a future beyond revenge, and he wasn't sure he believed in that future anymore. The years blended together. Year 5 became Year 7 became Year 10. The survivors stopped counting their losses and started counting their weapons. The grief that had overwhelmed them in those first terrible days transformed into something colder and harder. They didn't cry anymore. They didn't have nightmares. They just worked, built, planned, and waited. The galaxy remained oblivious. The Vraleth continued their expansion, conquering new worlds, growing fat on the resources of 1,000 species. They threw parades for Supreme Commander Thaxil. They composed songs about his victories. They never looked over their shoulders into the darkness where humanity waited. In Year 10, Minho called a meeting of the human leadership. Do-hyun came along with Sora, Tail, Hyunwoo, and the captains of the major fleet divisions. They gathered in a conference room carved from solid rock, surrounded by schematics and star charts. "We're ready," Minho said simply. "The fleets are built. The weapons are tested. We know where the Vraleth are and how they move. We can begin." The room fell silent. This was the moment they had worked toward for a decade. The moment when they stopped hiding and started hunting. "The first target is Korath Prime," Hyunwoo said, highlighting a star system on the map. "It's a Vraleth military base guarding their southern frontier. 200 ships, planetary shields considered absolutely impregnable. If we take it quickly and completely, the shock will spread through the Dominion. They'll know humanity survived. They'll know we're coming." "How many ships do we commit?" asked Captain Yoonji, who would be leading the assault. "All of them," Do-hyun said quietly. "Every ship we've built. Every weapon we've designed. We hit them with everything we have, and we don't stop until Korath Prime is ash." "This isn't a battle." "It's an announcement," the captains nodded. They had waited 10 years for this. They had lived in the darkness, building their strength, preparing for the day when they would emerge and make the galaxy understand what it had done. The meeting ended, and the fleet began to move. The burning of Earth, the warning came too late. Do-hyun stood on the observation deck of the Taeguk, staring at the blue marble that had been his home. Earth hung in the darkness of space, peaceful and beautiful, just as it had been for the past 3 months of his mission. He was drinking coffee, thinking about his wife and daughter waiting for him in Seoul. When the alarms began to scream, "Captain, we have multiple contacts emerging from quantum space," his sensor officer shouted. "Unknown vessels, directly above Earth's atmosphere." Do-hyun's coffee mug slipped from his fingers, floating away in the low gravity. Through the viewport, he could see them now. Ships, dozens of them. Each one was the size of a city, dark and angular like predators made of metal and hate. "Open a channel to Earth Defense Command," Do-hyun ordered, his voice steady despite the ice forming in his chest. "Sound general alert. All crew to stations." But Earth Defense Command never answered. The alien ships didn't send warnings. They didn't make demands. They simply began to fire. From his position near Jupiter, Do-hyun watched through long-range sensors as beams of purple light lanced down from the sky. Where they touched, cities vanished. Not destroyed slowly, not given time to evacuate, simply erased as if they had never existed at all. The sensors showed thermal blooms spreading across the planet's surface like a disease. Seoul was third to die. Do-hyun knew this because he was watching the live feeds, unable to look away, unable to process what his eyes were telling him. One moment the city lights sparkled in the night. The next moment there was only fire and ash spreading outward in a perfect circle. Dr. Jiwoo appeared beside him, her face pale. She was the expedition's chief scientist, brilliant and kind, someone who had spent her entire life studying the stars because she believed they held wonders. Now those stars had sent death. "They're targeting population centers," she whispered, her hands shaking as she pulled up tactical displays. "New York, Mumbai, Lagos, Shanghai. They're not interested in military targets. This is extermination." The bridge of the Taeguk had fallen silent except for the steady beep of sensors and the quiet sobbing of the communications officer. Everyone on this ship had family down there. Everyone was watching their world die. "How many ships do we have in Sol system?" Do-hyun asked, forcing himself to think, to plan, to do something other than scream. "3 colony vessels like ours, the mining stations on Mars, research teams on Europa and Titan," Jiwoo replied, wiping her eyes. "Maybe 200,000 people total scattered across the system. 200,000. Out of 10 billion Earth defense sent up every fighter they had." Do-hyun watched them swarm toward the alien vessels like angry insects, firing missiles and kinetic rounds that splashed uselessly against invisible shields. The alien ships didn't even bother to dodge. They just continued their methodical destruction while Earth's defenders threw themselves against them in futile rage. One by one, the human fighters were swatted from the sky. "Captain, we're receiving a wideband transmission," the communications officer said, her voice hoarse. "It's from the alien fleet. Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was cold, translated by some software into flat, emotionless English. "Primitive species of Sol 3. Your planet has been designated for resource extraction. Resistance is futile. Those who remain will be processed for genetic study. This is your only notification, that was all. No explanation of who they were or why they had chosen Earth. No demands for surrender or terms for peace. Just a simple statement of fact, as if humanity's extinction was nothing more than a business transaction. Do-hyun's hands clenched into fists. "Can we reach them? Can we fight?" "Our ship has mining lasers and basic defensive systems," Jiwoo said quietly. "Against those vessels, we might as well throw rocks." "Then we gather the survivors," Do-hyun decided. "Send out emergency protocols to every human facility in the system. Tell them to run dark, scatter into the asteroid belt anywhere the aliens might not look. If we can't save Earth, we save whoever we can." The attack lasted 6 hours. 6 hours for a civilization to die. The alien ships moved with terrible efficiency, covering every continent, every major city, every place where humans had built something worth building. They didn't leave survivors out of mercy. They simply didn't care about the scattered farms and villages, the isolated communities in mountains and deserts. Those would die slowly when infrastructure collapsed. When it was over, Earth was a burning tomb wrapped in nuclear winter. 3 billion people were dead. 7 billion more would follow in the coming weeks as the planet's ecosystem collapsed completely. The alien ships, their work complete, gathered into formation and vanished back into quantum space. They had spent 6 hours on their genocide. For them, it was probably just another Tuesday. Do-hyun stood at the viewport for a long time, staring at the dying world. Around him, his crew wept openly. Some prayed. Others sat in stunned silence, minds unable to process the enormity of the loss. "Captain." Jiwoo's voice was barely a whisper. "What do we do now?" Do-hyun didn't answer immediately. He thought about his wife, who had been visiting her parents in Busan when the beams fell. His daughter, who had been in school. His parents, his friends, everyone he had ever known or loved. All gone, erased as if they had never mattered at all. He thought about the alien voice, so casual in its pronouncement of humanity's extinction. As if Earth was nothing. As if humans were nothing. Something hard and cold settled into Do-hyun's chest, replacing the grief. It would take time, he knew. Time to fully understand what had happened. Time for the shock to fade and the rage to set in. But in this moment, watching Earth burn, Do-hyun made himself a promise. The aliens thought they had destroyed humanity. They thought they had ended the story of the species from Sol 3. They were wrong. This wasn't an ending. This was just the beginning. "We survived," Do-hyun said finally, his voice quiet but steady. "We gather everyone we can find. We hide, we build, we learn. And one day we make them pay for this." Jiwoo looked at him, tears still streaming down her face, and nodded. In her eyes, Do-hyun saw the same thing that now burned in his own heart. Not hope, not yet, but something harder. something that would keep them alive through the dark times ahead. The Teguk turned away from Earth, its engines burning as it headed deeper into the asteroid belt. Behind them, their homeworld continued to burn. The smoke and ash would circle the planet for years, blocking out the sun, killing everything that had somehow survived the initial attack. Earth was dead. But humanity was not yet. And the aliens who had done this would learn a terrible truth, that the most dangerous thing in the universe is not the strongest predator or the most advanced civilization. It's a victim with nothing left to lose and all the time in the world for revenge.